city.
Uh-huh.
Can you take us there?
On second thought, no. Not really, no.
No.
It's embarrassing. But, my friend might have been banished. Might have forgotten. The bosses would do terrible things to me. Terrible things to me if me going back there.
You hear that?
Yeah?
That is the sound of 1,000 terrible things heading this way.
If they find us, they will crush us, grind us into tiny pieces, and blast us into oblivion.
Ah. Your point is well seen. This way. Hurry!
Welcome, Masters and Padawans, to episode 586 of Full of Sith. This is your host, Bryan Young, and I am utterly delighted to be able to bring you an interview I have been waiting 25 years to be able to do and bring you. It was all too brief. This is going to be probably a short episode this week, but I had the unique pleasure of getting a chance to spend about 15 minutes talking to Ahmed, the actor behind Jar Jar Binks. We were able to speak on the occasion of the Light and Magic documentary that season 2 that Joe Johnston directed that hit Disney Plus while I was in Japan for during Star Wars Celebration. It went live. If you haven't watched it, you should. It's a really terrific and interesting look at how Lucasfilm made the jump from, the 80s into digital technology and the pushes that George Lucas made into modern filmmaking today. It's a fascinating look at basically how the movies we enjoy today would not be possible without George Lucas doing the stuff that he did and pushing for the things that he did over the years that he did it. Really, that revolution into digital filmmaking, I know that there is some resentment from some people. They don't really understand what that is or what that's done. They don't understand. I think that we take a lot of that stuff for granted. They say, oh, there's too much CG, and that's sort of the level of their complaint, and they sort of equate too much CG with George Lucas, but they don't necessarily equate all of the great things that we've been given that they don't even notice with George Lucas, and I think they should be giving him more credit for that. I think the documentary does a really great job delving into that. There's things you don't even notice, nor should you. I think it does a great job of explaining exactly how much of The Phantom Menace was physical and practical, and not giving that short shrift either. I think Phantom Menace has a bad rap for just being this big CGI fest, and people dismiss it as dated, but I don't think Phantom Menace looks dated at all. I think the effects hold up remarkably well, and part of that is, and they say it in the documentary, that it has more physical model and visual effect shots than the entire classic trilogy combined. And it shows with love in every frame of that movie. And one of the things that George Lucas really pushed the envelope on were the CG characters. Now, we really take that for granted now, I just saw Thunderbolts over the weekend, and there's so much that film did that just wouldn't be possible without the work of George Lucas. I saw, Captain America, the new Captain America movie, a few months ago, which I really enjoyed. Again, Harrison Ford and his work as Hulk just couldn't exist without Jar Jar Binks. And I know a lot of people give Andy Serkis a lot of credit for being like the pioneer of motion capture performance, but really he's not. It was Ahmed Best there at the forefront. It was a technology that was literally like invented in the 11th hour to make sure that George Lucas could have Ahmed's performance as Jar Jar on screen rather than just straight up animation for the character. And the documentary does such a great job of delving into that. And that's one of the things that I got to talk to Ahmed Best about when you listen to the interview in just a minute. As I said, the documentary was directed by Joe Johnston. You'll recognize Joe Johnston as one of the artists and designers on the classic trilogy films. He did so much of that behind the scenes work. You know, you've seen his work. You've seen his drawings. I know as a little kid, you know, I would flip through books of his drawings from Empire Strikes Back and try to copy them in my sketchbooks of AT-ATs and Tauntauns and things, and him and Nilo Rodas Jamero and what they brought to the table, and just they had this really cool design style. But Joe Johnston was there with ILM almost from the beginning, and he left and he wasn't there for this revolution. And so it was a really inspired choice to ask him to come and direct this documentary and explore what these years of transition were, because he'd experienced it as an outsider, right? Like he'd worked with ILM as a filmmaker. You know, he left to be a filmmaker and a film director, and he's a terrific film director. If you've seen The Rocketeer or October Sky or Captain America: The First Avenger, he's a wonderful filmmaker, and he is really good at his job. And it was really fascinating to hear him behind the camera asking the questions of folks like John Knoll, Ahmed Best, Rob Coleman, Dennis Muren, and Doug Chang, as they shepherded us through this really overwhelmingly emotional, in surprising ways, like 3-part documentary. It's just a really good documentary, and I think you should absolutely give it a watch. And I hope absolutely that you do. Ahmed Best's story as part of it is one of the, you know, really the best parts of it. And I mean, partially because I'm just a big Jar Jar Binks fan. I think anybody who's listened to this show for any meaningful length of time knows my feelings about Jar Jar Binks. I've been a pretty solid advocate of Jar Jar as long as I've been existing on the internet, for as long as anybody can remember. No matter what that has cost me, as far as, I don't want to say it's cost me anything meaningful, but it's certainly, I've had my share of being told that my opinion doesn't mean anything if I'm defending Jar Jar Binks. And I've certainly lost friends over my defense of everyone's favorite Gungan. But that's okay, because I'm going to unabashedly like what I like. And I think Jar Jar is something that I can't help but like. I can't force myself to dislike something because someone else does. And I can't force myself to dislike something because someone else says I should. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I just like what I like. I have been really trying to organize an interview with Ahmed Best for a long time, and I was so grateful that the folks at Disney's PR and Lucasfilm's PR were able to organize this for me, because he was doing PR for Light and Magic. And it was really interesting. In the Light and Magic documentary, you should watch it, that there are scenes and footage of Ahmed Best and Rob Coleman and some of the others doing press for Phantom Menace, and it is not. It feels a lot more hostile than I think that they've been getting for Light and Magic, and it's a bit of a 180. And I'm really glad that they're getting this experience for Star Wars the way they should be now than they did then. I really hate that it's taken 20 years for them to get to this point, but better late than never. And so without further ado, here's the interview with Ahmed Best, and then we'll be back to talk in just a few minutes. I've been waiting a long time to be able to organize being able to talk to you.
Oh, my pleasure, man. My pleasure.
So diving right in, because I know we don't have a whole lot of time. Talking to Dave Filoni once and sort of watching in the Light and Magic documentary, it seemed like Filoni had said the way that you talk to George, just in general, is through cinema. Like that's just kind of the language he speaks. And in the documentary, you talked about how a lot of where Jar Jar came from was, um, Buster Keaton and the old silent films, and that's something that a lot of people sort of seemed to miss right off the bat. And I'm wondering what those conversations were like with George about that in the early days and sort of what he pointed you to and how that went when you were coming on.
Yeah, I mean those are some of my favorite times during the Phantom Menace specifically, and just in general with George. I think he communicates through art in general. He's very much an art historian as well as a cinema historian. He's really, really good at finding images and emotions to help explain where he's going or what he's thinking about or how he's doing things. So it was great to like sit down and watch Buster Keaton movies with him, and it was really great to sit down and watch Charlie Chaplin movies with him to help develop Jar Jar into what Jar Jar became physically, emotionally, comically, right? One of the wonderful things about the Buster Keaton movies that George and I kind of discovered together for Jar Jar was how Buster Keaton just travels through the world and everyone else is crazy, right? Like he's the guy who's just like, wait, why isn't anyone else climbing up a clock tower to change the time? Why why am I the only person doing this? We should all be doing this. And that idea of, I'm the sane one really kind of permeates through the Jar Jar metaphor as well. You know, like even to the point of where Jar Jar is not really impressed with Jedis. Like, you guys actually have to show me what you do in order for me to actually care about, this force thing that you keep
Yeah.
talking about, you know? So that was really wonderful to be able to craft a character using George's acumen with art history, film history, and these ideas that permeate through like the old silent films.
There's that element of like Chaplin's The Tramp too,
Yeah,
right? Like
very much so.
where Jar Jar, like you kind of almost see him at the beginning of Phantom Menace, almost like Chaplin at the beginning of City Lights, right?
Hmm.
Where it's just like, well, I'm gonna find some food and do my thing, and oh, everything's gonna just start coming at me. Um, and it's just so, I don't know, like as a film nerd, like it's really wonderful, and I was always disappointed people didn't respond to that as well as I did.
Yeah, well, I mean, if everyone were film nerds like us, right? I mean,
Yeah,
it's difficult to try to really, it's like that old adage, if you have to explain the joke,
yeah,
you have to have a reference for these things in order for you to really understand like why it works. And, nowadays people have really turned themselves into the media nerds that only a select few were back then, because you didn't have actually that much access to the media, right? Now you have entire, TikTok and YouTube pages breaking down every bit of minutia in every film. So, we can do that now because we have access to those tools, and we have people who are, very much like us, who will sit down, for a day and frame by frame take everything apart and explain it to us, right? That wasn't done back in 1999 because we didn't have that access unless you were like in film school, you had access to a film library, right? But I think because of movies like Phantom Menace and because of the prequels, that became a thing, right? It really gave the cinephiles um, access to really breaking things down frame by frame, and then trained the next generation of cinephiles to do that to a point of where we're at now, where it's kind of commonplace to do.
Yeah, no, it's definitely been my favorite thing. Oh, my cats are. Um, I got to write the cinema behind Star Wars column at starwars.com for a long time and got
Mm,
to track all that for people, and really I love that stuff. Um,
hmm.
the technology aspect, it seemed um it seemed with in the documentary, and like it seemed like the dots were there, and I'm wondering if you can kind of clarify this, but like it seemed like the need for the motion capture and the need for Rob Coleman and John Knoll and that team to create the motion capture was it was less the cost as much as George seemed a little upset that the reason he hired you was because he wanted you to perform Jar Jar. That
Mm,
the idea was that you two had had the conversations about Buster Keaton and Chaplin and who Jar Jar was, and that you were going to be his conduit to get this character and communicate that on the screen. And that
mhm,
although it was cheaper for them to animate Jar Jar the way it was, he wanted you on the screen there. And the motion capture was
mhm.
sort of the um, it wasn't just that it was going to be easier for them to animate, it was also to sort of, I don't want to say placate George, but to give George what he wanted was to put you on the screen there as well. Am I misreading that in the
No,
documentary?
I think we all came to this agreement with performance capture, about it being the best way to create the character, right? Um, and I think it wasn't just, and this goes to the collaboration of what making a movie actually is. It's all of these teams coming together and agreeing on the best idea. And what I brought to Jar Jar was a physical nuance that it would have taken a team of animators to do, right? So rather than using my performance as an actor and as a mover and as a physical performer and actor, right? It takes out a lot of the guesswork for animators to know what works and what doesn't, what resonates and what doesn't resonate. And because I'm working with the other people on set, I can react to them honestly. And it was the honesty, I think, that George responded to. I don't think it was it wasn't the cost effectiveness of it. He recognized what my performance did to the room, right? He recognized what my performance did to the film. He recognized what my performance did to the other actors. And so, being pragmatic, George was like, well, why can't we just do what Ahmed is doing? Because it's working, right? And Rob and John agreed after a while, right? Um, it was a Herculean task. And to focus the animators on execution of performance is way easier to do than to focus them on you're an actor now, and now you have to perform like an actor, and you have to respond like an actor, and you have to do these things that might or might not work, right? Rather than Ahmed did this thing, it worked, do that. So I think overall it became this wonderful collaboration that we could all get behind.
Is it, at what point would you say that it's felt like it started to turn around, like watching those press junket interviews, and sort of the shell-shocked nature of the press junket interviews from Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
And I've interviewed Rob a few times over the years about his reaction to feeling, his feelings about those press junkets and whatnot, and sort of his reaction coming out of those. And, I experienced it, sort of, I lost friends over how much I liked Phantom Menace in '99, if you can believe it. Um,
Okay.
yeah, I figure of anybody in the world you could. Um,
Yeah.
at what point did that start turning around for you and you started realizing, like, started feeling like this, where we could have a conversation about, you could start having these conversations in the press? I imagine the press conferences or the press interviews you've been having for Light and Magic are night and day compared to what they were for Phantom Menace. And the
Yeah.
topics are largely the same.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think it took 20 years in order for the conversation to change. And it took the kids who Phantom Menace was made for to grow up and look at the adults who were so angry about it and really ask them, like, what's your problem? But it really took 20 years. And to be honest, 20 years before, George actually said it's going to take 20 years for this to change. Literally said 20 years from now, it's going to be a different story. And he was right, you know. And one of the reasons why I moved into like the futurist space, especially with Afrofuturism, is because of George Lucas, because he created for the future, right? Even down to the way, um, even down to the way of making movies, right? Um, the digital capture, the digital art, the digital release. Like he made the change. He completely made the change. So, and he was doing that with eyes on the future. So at the time when he was like 20 years from now, it's going to be a different story. That's when I was really going, you know what, there's something to this future thing. And then this was 20 years ago. And I was like, I want to really look into this because as a futurist, um, as a futurist, I wanted to understand how he got it so right and how he was so confident with it, right? Like how he's so confident with saying like 20 years from now it's going to be different. And I remember when we as a team were crafting Jar Jar, it felt like we were living in the future, and I really loved it. And I wanted to be a part of that kind of world building, future building for the rest of my life. And the hardest thing about what happened back then in those junkets and the you know the backlash and the comments about Jar Jar is I personally, as a contributor to the team, I was left out of that completely, right? I couldn't push the art form forward. It went to somebody else or others, right? Knowing that I helped pioneer this technology, knowing that I helped pioneer this technique as an actor, right? This is a brand new acting technique that this actor helped craft. I was left out of that conversation. And I wanted to really investigate why and how to get back in there.
Um, we ran out of time. I've got hours and hours of questions I wish I could. have time to ask you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Jar Jar's a
My
character
pleasure,
that
Brian.
meant a lot to me over the years. Definitely one of my favorites, if you can believe that.
I
Um,
believe it.
yeah, yeah.
It's 20 years later. I believe it all now.
Well, I mean, it's been there since the beginning, right? Like I've been writing pieces in the Star Wars Insider for years,
Yeah.
about how Jar Jar, I don't know, like I can't look at Empire Strikes Back and Yoda's introduction the same because when he shows up, he's acting like Jar Jar and putting Luke through that test, just like Qui-Gon is putting everybody through that with Jar Jar, just trying
Yeah.
to treat him like a person,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. And I just really responded well to Jar Jar right off the bat. And that all that film nerd stuff. So he meant a lot, and I I really I'm really glad I got to speak to you.
Man, it's been my pleasure, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. It took everything I had not to just nerd out at him. Um, there's interviews that have been really hard to do and maintain my professional demeanor. Um, you know, Carrie Fisher was one, and if you've gone back and listened to my interview with Carrie Fisher, that was definitely hard. I mean, partially because she gave a dude an open mouth kiss at the end of the stage before the interview started, and that kind of set things on, a trajectory I couldn't have predicted. And so that was a little hard to keep my professional, mask on. And George Lucas is another one where it was like, I interviewed him for the movie Strange Magic, and it was very much we want you to talk to George Lucas for 20 minutes, but you can't bring up Star Wars, and you can't fanboy out and having to put on that professional mask. And those were very hard, and this interview was up there. So if it seems like know that it was much more restrained than it could have been. And really I could have spent much more time talking to him. I wish I could have. Hopefully there's another time in the future where I get to talk to him. I hope there's another interview in the future that I get to do with him, because he was very easy to talk to and very fascinating to talk to. I really would like to explore more of that cinema influence, and I really would like to dive deeper into, there's a sequence in the documentary, and they elaborated on it more at Star Wars Celebration in Japan, but Rob Coleman was sort of tasked with creating the choreography for the Yoda and Dooku fight, because they knew that was going to have to be digital, at least mostly in some way, at least for Yoda's parts. And in the script, it sort of just said, Yoda and Count Dooku have the most spectacular fight you've ever seen. And George just left that to Rob Coleman, and he had no idea how he was going to do it. And he went to Nick Gillard, the stunt coordinator, and he kind of gave him some hints and tips about how he imagined it. And he went to Ahmed Best, and Ahmed Best was like, I got you, man. Like, this is what we got to do. And he showed him a whole bunch of like anime films and martial arts movies, and really put him in the frame of mind for that, and kind of like really showed him a way to step outside of what he might have been thinking about to get Yoda in there. And he and Rob Coleman, Ahmed Best and Rob Coleman, like choreographed that fight based on all of these martial arts movies and anime that they'd been watching. And like they did that. And at Celebration, Ahmed Best talked about how, like, he went away and he didn't hear anything about it again until the premiere. And that was the thing he was most excited to see in the movie at the premiere, and he like lost it with the audience when Yoda came out and did that fight. Especially because it was like the stuff that they talked about in his trailer as they were trying to figure out that fight. I'd love to talk to him more about that. I'd love to talk to him more about, just how Star Wars, the rest of the Star Wars saga has changed for him being part of it. What his journey's been like over the last 20 years. There's so much I want to talk to him about. The mythology of Jar Jar himself in the universe. There's a lot. As you can tell, I would like to speak much, much more about it. I could speak about Jar Jar for hours and hours and hours and days and days and days and weeks and weeks and weeks. But I will leave that here for now. And, I'm really grateful I got to do this. Sometimes this is one of those days, you just get to pinch yourself, or I do, right? Where I have to pinch myself and go like, I get to do cool stuff sometimes. I'm really grateful I get to do it. Because I get to talk to my heroes now and again. And unfailingly, when I get to talk to my heroes, when they're involved in Star Wars, they're really good people, and they're really smart people, and I learn from them every time I get to talk to them. And hopefully passing that on to you all. Oh, my cats are being cats. Getting to pass that on to you all through the podcast and stuff, I hope, helps you all. Like, I don't know. I'm really grateful I get to let everybody tag along on that journey. And we've gotten to do some pretty cool interviews. I hope you all feel like you've been to some pretty cool places with me, because I really do feel like I'm bringing you all along, and I really love to do that. So, for me, you can find me at swankmatron.com, and swankmatron on social media, mostly Blue Sky these days. I've got a new collection of stories that have mostly already coming out in the Battletech universe soon, called Lone Wolf and Fox. So you should look for that pretty soon. And you can look for signed copies on my website at swankmatron.com. And I'd love if you checked that out. And for Full of Sith, you can go to fullofsith.com and look for the entire back catalog of episodes at, fullofsith.com. We've got well over 600 releases. We've got 13 years of content, and, there are so many people we've talked to, so many topics we've covered. If there's a corner of the Star Wars galaxy that you like, or that you're interested in, or someone that you are interested in hearing from, chances are we've talked to them or about them. So there's something in the archive that's going to have interested you somewhere. So there's a pretty robust search feature on the website, so you're able to find any of the episodes. Just look up the name of whoever or whatever it is you're looking for at fullofsith.com, and you're going to find something worth listening to. And sometimes they're not even Star Wars folks, like you can hear folks like Will Wheaton on the show, or Art Spiegelman, or Travis Beecham, the guy who wrote Pacific Rim, or Joey Fatone from of boy band fame, spent some time with us to talk about his Star Wars fandom, or Darren Hayes, the singer from The Singer. We just love talking Star Wars with folks. So so fullofsith.com. Be sure to rate and review it wherever it is you listen to the show too, and we love hearing from you, so send us an email at holocron@fullofsith.com, and we'd love to hear from you. And hopefully we'll be back to that next week on our regular schedule. So without further ado, so for super producer Mike Pilot, For Holly Fry, who couldn't be here this week because I was doing this, I'm Bryan Young, and the Force will be with you, always.
Sir, if you'll not be needing me, I'll close down for a while.